Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and felt that stinging ache of not being enough? That sinking feeling that everyone else possesses a natural radiance or a gift that you were denied? Perhaps you feel that no matter how hard you strive, how much you work, or how much you sacrifice, you will never measure up to what the world defines as lovely. We live in a culture obsessed with image, where worth is often calculated by likes, filters, and public approval. But thousands of years ago, there was a woman who faced this exact crushing weight of rejection, yet her story contains the antidote to our modern insecurity. Hidden within the pages of Scripture is a figure who appears in 117 verses. To put that in perspective, that is more screen time than the warrior Deborah, more than the loyal Ruth, and by some counts, even more than Queen Esther. Yet, most Christians have never heard her name or know her story. She was not a prophetess who called down fire, nor a mother of a nation. She was a woman whose skin was so darkened by the relentless sun that people stepped away from her in the streets. She was a laborer who toiled in the dirt, while the wealthy rested in perfumed chambers. She was so ordinary that when she walked through her village, no one turned to look, or if they did, it was with disdain. History calls her the Shulamite, and she became the most celebrated woman in all of Scripture. Not because she changed her appearance, not because she hid her scars, but because a king looked past what the world saw and declared her the most beautiful woman in the world. King Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, wrote his Song of Songs, the greatest song, entirely about her. 8 chapters devoted to a peasant girl whom society had discarded. This book, the Song of Solomon, is often the most misunderstood and neglected book in the Bible. Many avoid it because of its intimacy, or they dismiss it as merely poetry. But it is far more than an ancient romance novel. It is a divine blueprint of identity. It is the story of a girl who was told she was too dark, too rough, too much of nothing, standing before a king who saw her true worth. And there is something I will reveal at the end of this video, a specific truth about how God views you right now that will completely dismantle the lies you have believed about yourself. So stay with me, because the story of the woman who was dark but lovely, rejected but chosen, ordinary but celebrated, is about to change the way you see yourself forever. To understand her, we must leave the modern world behind and step into the heat and dust of ancient Israel. To understand the depth of the Shulamite's transformation, we need to transport ourselves back to the rugged landscape of ancient Israel, far removed from the polished marble palaces of Jerusalem. We must go to the vineyards of the countryside, to a small, insignificant village called Shunem. Imagine the scene vividly. The midday sun is blazing overhead, turning the sky a blinding white with heat, baking the earth until it cracks beneath your feet. Rows of grapevines stretch endlessly across the arid hillsides, their leaves dusty and wilting in the shimmering air. The atmosphere is thick, heavy with the smell of earth and ripening fruit, mixed with the sharp, metallic scent of sweat. The only sounds are the rhythmic snip of pruning shears and the voices of workers calling to each other, their throats hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. And there, buried among the leaves and the heat, was a young woman. She was the antithesis of the ideal beauty of her time. Her hands were not soft and manicured. They were calloused, cracked, and stained permanently with the purple juice of the harvest. Her skin was not the porcelain white of the aristocracy. It was tanned so dark by the relentless sun that the wealthy women of the region would not let her touch their fine fabrics. Her clothes were simple, worn thin by labor, and caked with the dust of the fields. Her back ached from bending over vines from dawn until dusk, and her feet were bare and tough as leather. We do not know her actual name. Scripture identifies her only by her origin, the Shulamite. She was not royalty. She was not wealthy. By the brutal standards of her day, she was not even considered beautiful. In ancient Israel, pale skin was everything. It was a status symbol that screamed privilege. It meant you were wealthy enough to stay indoors, refined enough to avoid manual labor, and protected from the harsh elements. Dark skin, conversely, was the mark of poverty. It labeled you as a field worker, a servant, someone who existed to serve others rather than to be served. The tragedy of her situation was compounded by betrayal within her own home. The Bible tells us that her own brothers were angry with her. While Scripture does not explicitly detail the cause of this family rift, the result was punishment. They forced her to tend the family vineyards, essentially enslaving their sister to the soil while they pursued other interests. She was the family scapegoat, pushed out into the burning sun day after day, year after year. We hear her voice trembling with insecurity in the first chapter of the Song of Solomon. She pleads, "Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyard I had to neglect." Can you hear the defensive pain in those words? She was not just stating a fact. She was apologizing for her existence. She was begging people not to judge her by the color of her skin or her rough appearance. She felt she owed the world an explanation for her survival. When she said she had neglected her own vineyard, she meant she had no time to care for herself. She had no time for rest, no time for beauty oils, no time to fit the mold of what society said a woman should be. She knew the whispers followed her. She felt the judgment in every glance. But she had no idea that her season of shame was setting the stage for a glory she could never have predicted. But here is what the Shulamite did not know as she wiped the sweat from her brow that blistering afternoon. Someone was watching. Someone had eyes that saw past the sunburned skin, the calloused hands, and the worn-out clothes. Someone saw her heart, her quiet strength, and a beauty that radiant cosmetics could never manufacture. That someone was the king. King Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest man in the known world, was traveling through the countryside. Perhaps he was inspecting his royal vineyards, or perhaps, weary of the politics and pretense of the court, he was seeking solitude among the hills. But when he saw the Shulamite working in the fields, something happened that would alter the course of history. He did not see a peasant. He saw a queen in the making. Picture that moment in vivid cinematic detail. The afternoon sun is beating down without mercy, dust hanging in the air like a heavy veil. The workers move through the rows of grapes, their movement slow and rhythmic with exhaustion. And then a figure approaches. The text and tradition suggest Solomon may have been disguised, appearing not in full royal regalia, but as a shepherd or a traveler. The Shulamite did not notice him at first. She was laser-focused on her work, pruning a stubborn vine that had grown wild. Her headscarf had slipped back, revealing dark hair damp with exertion. Her hands moved with practiced skill cutting, sorting, tossing aside dead branches. She had no idea she was the center of attention. Solomon stood there, frozen. Why? Because he saw something no one else had ever bothered to look for. He saw her focus. He saw her diligence. He saw her authenticity. In a palace filled with women who spent all day adorning themselves to gain favor, here was a woman who was not performing for anyone. She was not pretending. She was simply herself working, surviving, living honestly in the reality of her hard circumstances. To a king tired of games, that raw reality was breathtaking. When he finally approached her, breaking the silence of the field, she was likely terrified. A man of noble bearing speaking to a field hand was unheard of. She probably expected a reprimand, a command to work faster, or a critique of her technique. Instead, he spoke with kindness. She was confused. Why would anyone notice her? Why would anyone see beauty in someone so marked by the sun? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever had someone compliment you, and your immediate instinct was to argue, to deflect, to list all the reasons why they must be mistaken? That is exactly where the Shulamite was. Solomon began to speak words over her that sounded foreign to her ears. He called her beautiful. He compared her eyes to doves gentle and pure. He spoke poetry over her ordinary, gritty life. And slowly, cautiously, the Shulamite began to wonder if this was not a cruel joke. But the gap between his words and her self-perception was wide. He was speaking to the woman he saw. She was hearing him through the filter of the woman she thought she was. She saw dirt. He saw gold. She saw a servant. He saw a bride. And what Solomon was doing in that vineyard was not just starting a romance. He was initiating a process of restoration. He was planting seeds of identity that would soon have to survive the harsh scrutiny of the palace. The question was, Could she dare to believe him? The journey from the vineyard to the palace was not just a physical one. It was a violent war for her self-worth. Even as Solomon pursued her, even as he invited her to leave her life of labor and come away with him, the Shulamite wrestled with a crushing sense of imposter syndrome. The voices of shame she had lived with for years were loud and persistent. The years of being stared at, of being told she was not enough, of working while others rested, had left wounds on her soul that did not vanish simply because a king said kind words. She wrestled with the gap between who she had always believed she was the rejected worker and who this king was declaring her to be the beloved bride. How could both be true? The daughters of Jerusalem did not help. These were the palace women, the socialites with pale skin, soft hands, and elaborate hairstyles. They looked at the Shulamite with barely concealed disdain. Who was this field worker pretending to belong among royalty? She heard their whispers. She saw their sidelong glances. Every look from them was a mirror reminding her of the dirt she came from. But something began to shift inside her. The more time she spent in Solomon's presence, the more his words began to sink deeper than the shame. His love was not conditional. It was not based on her scrubbing her skin raw or changing her history. He loved her as she was. And that kind of love, the kind that does not demand you be different before it accepts you, is the only force strong enough to transform a human heart. The turning point came when the Shulamite finally stopped arguing with what Solomon had been declaring all along. She stopped deflecting his compliments. She stopped hiding behind explanations. She stood up, looked at the critical daughters of Jerusalem, and made a declaration that would echo through centuries in Song of Solomon 1:5. Dark am I, yet lovely. Notice the change. Not dark but lovely, as if the darkness needed to be excused. In the Hebrew text, the conjunction implies and. Dark and lovely. Both true at the same time. She owned her reality. She acknowledged what made her different, her history, her scars, her appearance, but she also embraced the truth that her worth was not diminished by it. She was no longer asking for permission to be beautiful. She was standing in the identity the king had given her. Solomon's response to this confidence was immediate and overwhelming. He did not just agree. He escalated his praise. In chapter 4, he declares, "You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. No flaw." Let that sink in. The woman who had been rejected by her family was now being told by the king of Israel that she was perfect. Not because she was flawless, but because love sees differently than judgment does. And then came the wedding. The Shulamite, the peasant girl from the vineyards who was not supposed to matter, became the queen of Israel. Solomon brought her into his palace, not as a servant, but as a sovereign. Can you imagine the sensory shock of that moment? She walked into the palace, the cool, smooth marble floors beneath feet that had only known burning dirt and sharp stones. Silk curtains brushed against skin that had only known rough linen. Servants bowed low to the woman who had spent her entire life serving others. Solomon placed a crown on her head. He did not ask her to forget her past or pretend she had always been royalty. He loved the woman from the vineyard. He saw her darkness not as a failure, but as a testament to her resilience. This is the love that transforms not by erasing the past, but by redeeming it. But just as the fairy tale seemed complete, the story takes a turn that reveals the most painful, yet necessary, truth about real love. Now, you might think the story ends there. Girl meets king, gets crowned, lives happily ever after. That is the Hollywood ending. But the Bible is not Hollywood. It is brutally honest about the human heart. The story does not end with the wedding and the crown. In fact, the most powerful and piercing part of the Song of Solomon comes after the Shulamite becomes queen. Because even in the palace, even with the crown on her head, surrounded by luxury and honor, the struggle was not fully over. Complacency had begun to set in. Chapter 5 records a heartbreaking moment that shows us something crucial about the nature of love. One night, while the Shulamite was sleeping, Solomon came to her door. He knocked, calling out to her with words of intimacy and longing, asking her to open the door, to let him in. It was a simple request from her beloved. But she hesitated. She was comfortable. She was warm. She had already washed her feet for the night, a ritual in dusty Israel that signaled the end of the day. To get up would mean getting dirty again. To get up would be an inconvenience. She made excuses. She delayed. I have taken off my robe, must I put it on again? I have washed my feet, must I soil them again? It seems like such a small thing, does not it? But in that moment, she let comfort speak louder than love. She let a momentary inconvenience outweigh the presence of the king. By the time she finally rose to open the door, her hands dripping with myrrh, her heart finally stirring, she pulled the latch back, and silence greeted her. He was gone. He had not broken the door down. He had not forced his way in. Love, true love, does not force itself upon you. It knocks, and if it is ignored, it withdraws. Panic seized her. The comfort of her bed suddenly felt like a prison. She ran out into the dark streets of Jerusalem in the middle of the night, still in her nightclothes, searching for him, calling his name desperately. But the city was not the palace. The watchmen, the guards who patrolled the walls, found her. They did not recognize the queen in her desperation and disarray. The Bible tells us they beat her and bruised her. They took away her cloak. She was wounded, humiliated, exposed, and utterly alone. In that devastating moment, the Shulamite realized something that many of us spend a lifetime ignoring. Love requires a response. It is not enough to simply know you are loved. You have to open the door. You have to let the lover in. You have to stop making excuses, stop delaying, and stop prioritizing your own comfort over the relationship. How many times have you done this? How many times has God knocked on the door of your heart, prompting you to pray, to move, to trust, to step out in faith, and you hesitated? I am too tired, Lord. I am not ready. I will do it tomorrow. We think the offer will stand forever. We think we can keep love waiting in the hallway while we stay comfortable in our beds. But the Shulamite's bruised body and empty doorway teach us that intimacy is a two-way street. The king pursued her to the vineyard, yes, but she had to pursue him back. When she finally found Solomon again, when they were reunited after that painful night of searching, his reaction was not what she feared. He did not reject her for her hesitation. He did not cast her out for her moment of selfishness. Instead, he received her. And in that reunion, the Shulamite made a declaration that shows just how much she had grown through the struggle. In Song of Solomon 6:3, she says, I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. Notice the difference. Earlier in the book, she focused on his ownership of her. Now there is a mutual, unshakable confidence. No more I hope he still loves me after I messed up. No more I need to earn my way back. Just complete security. I belong to him. He belongs to me. This is who we are. Nothing can change it. The book ends with one of the most powerful passages in all of Scripture, where the Shulamite says, Place me like a seal over your heart. For love is as strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. She finally understood that the love she had found was not fragile. It was not going to disappear the moment she failed or the moment her appearance faded. This love was an unstoppable force, as permanent as the grave, as fierce as fire. But here's the twist I promised you at the beginning. This is not just a romance novel about a dusty vineyard girl and an ancient king. The Shulamite is a living picture of you. God used Solomon and the Shulamite to stage a divine play about his love for us. Solomon, the son of David, the Prince of Peace, represents Jesus Christ. The Shulamite, the peasant bride who is dark with the dust of the earth, represents the church, you, me. Every person who has ever felt too ordinary, too broken, or too stained to be loved by a holy God. Every detail points to the gospel. Just as the Shulamite was darkened by our labor in the vineyards, we are darkened by our struggle with sin and our striving to be good enough. Just as she felt unworthy of the king's gaze, we often feel unworthy of God's presence. But just as Solomon left his palace to find her in the dirt, Jesus left heaven to find us in our mess. The Apostle Paul unlocks this mystery in Ephesians 5 when he tells husbands to love their wives just as Christ loved the church. How did he love her? He made her holy, cleansing her, to present her to himself without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish. Do you see it? When God looks at you, he does not see your darkness. He sees the righteousness of his Son. He looks at you with all your past mistakes, your current insecurities, and your hidden shame, and he declares, there is no flaw in you. Not because you are perfect, but because you are his. So, the question today is not, am I good enough for God? The question is, will I stop arguing with the king? The Shulamite's mistake was keeping the door closed because she did not want to be inconvenienced or exposed. God is knocking on the door of your heart right now. He is not demanding perfection. He is offering presence. He is saying, I see you. I know you are dark, but I call you lovely. Will you let me in? Do not be like the Shulamite in her moment of hesitation. Do not wait until you feel clean enough to open the door. Open it now. Embrace the identity he gives you. You are dark, yes. You have struggles. You have a past. But you are lovely chosen, royal, and beloved. Stop fighting the love that has already won you. You are the Shulamite, and the king is calling your name.